Rachella wasn't a romantic gesture. It was Sandoval's love letter to Raquel, written behind Ariana's back. The infamous Rachella proposal has aged into one of those Vanderpump milestones that feels less like a romantic gesture and more like a forensic clue in Sandoval's endless audition for most self-absorbed man alive. At the time, it was pitched as James Kennedy's grand proposal to Raquel, but of course Tom Sandoval couldn't resist making himself the central figure. Financing a Coachella-themed extravaganza, complete with the smug pride of a man who loves a spotlight almost as much as he loves his flat iron, Sandoval played the role of fairy godfather, writing checks and orchestrating details that, in hindsight, scream ulterior motive. Theories abound, and none of them flatter him. Was it a veiled dig at Ariana, who once called Coachella their thing and admitted she would have said yes to such a proposal? Perhaps. Was it an elaborate way to impress Raquel, already the object of his misplaced affections? Almost certainly. Or was it, more simply, another installment in his long-running campaign to prove he is the most extra friend in any given scene? Whether that meant financing Sheena during COVID, overproducing Jax's wedding, or staging his own over-the-top best man performance, all of the above are perfectly on brand. What makes the moment so grotesque is not just the financial excess, reportedly around $15,000 for someone else's engagement party, but the emotional rot beneath it. By then, Sandoval and Raquel were circling each other in what at minimum was an emotional affair. Watch their interactions at the time, and it's painfully obvious. The nervous energy, the near slip of babe in the kitchen, the post-haircut flirtations. The alleged Coachella hookup only makes the timing look filthier. Some argue Sandoval isn't smart enough to be that devious, that he operates reactively rather than methodically. But stupidity and malice are not mutually exclusive. Narcissists don't need grand intellect to cause collateral damage. They only need impulse, vanity, and a flair for performance. Sandoval checks every box. The cruelty to Ariana feels almost incidental, which is perhaps worse. He likely didn't give her feelings a thought. Not when he staged a faux festival for another couple. Not when he delivered cupcakes she hated for her birthday. Not when he dangled marriage and children as empty bargaining chips. For Ariana, who once beamed at the Rachella spectacle, realizing later that the whole charade was tainted must have been gut-wrenching. In the end, Rachella reads less like a grand romantic gesture and more like a grotesque love letter to Raquel, written in neon and paid for with someone else's dignity. Whether intended as an insult to Ariana, a seduction of Raquel, or just another stage for Sandoval to perform his good guy role, the result was the same. A spectacle soaked in ego, betrayal, and bad taste. It's fitting, really. Coachella has always been their playground for messy hookups, betrayals, and drug-fueled declarations. Sandoval simply elevated it into his own warped art form, an art form in which everyone but him ends up the punchline. Lisa Vanderpump didn't just know about Scandoval, she helped produce it. The enduring question in the Vanderpump Rules saga isn't whether Tom Sandoval and Rachel Leviss were sloppy about their affair, they were, but whether Lisa Vanderpump and production were genuinely blindsided. The evidence suggests otherwise. From the earliest seasons, Lisa positioned herself as the regal confidant who hears things but doesn't repeat them. Recall Season 2. When Stassi confided about Kristen and Jax, Lisa admitted in her confessional that it wasn't the first she'd heard. Translation: Lisa always knows. She just chooses when and how to deploy the information. Fast forward to the now infamous scene at her restaurant where Rachel plops herself down between Sandoval and Schwartz. Tom beams like a teenager at prom, and Lisa coyly asks why he's so happy. His response, sticking out his tongue, lands with all the authenticity of a rehearsal. If it felt staged, that's because it probably was. Enter Ken Todd, Lisa's ever-reliable mouthpiece. When Lisa once quoted Margaret Thatcher's line, "If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman," it was a wink at her preferred strategy. Let Ken say the messy part so she doesn't have to. His awkward delivery about Raquel sleeping at Tom's may have been the fakest scene in VPR history, but it served its purpose. Lisa stayed above the fray, while Ken, gossip queen that he is, fulfilled his annual screen time quota. And this wasn't a one-off. Ken has repeatedly been used as Lisa's messenger, from ratting out Jax's bathroom tryst with Laura Lee to relaying who gave James those infamous love bites. His role as Bravo's most reluctant gossip columnist has been long established. The bigger question, how much did Lisa and production actually know? The short answer, plenty. Lisa and Ken aren't just figureheads, they're executive producers. Their livelihoods depend on juicy television, suggesting they were blindsided insults both their intelligence and their business savvy. The signs were everywhere. Rachel arriving late to set, openly admitting she'd been at Tom's. Their background canoodling caught on camera. Sandoval's glaringly obvious attempts to paint Ariana as dismissive. Production's choice to linger on certain shots, like Sandoval's scuzzy face during James and Raquel's breakup, wasn't coincidental. They suspected something. They just didn't have the money shot yet. Lisa's pattern has always been calculated detachment. During the Miami Girls scandal, she said outright in her confessional that she believed Tom cheated, and Ariana was naive to deny it. She knows when her men are lying. She simply doesn't intervene until it suits the storyline, or until Ariana's phone check blows the whole thing up on its own. Even the timeline suggests a cover-up. After the scandal broke, Bravo admitted to re-editing earlier episodes to highlight the signs viewers missed. That's less about hindsight and more about preserving the illusion that they were clueless. Of course, Lisa's defenders argue she didn't want to pile on Sandoval at the reunion. But her insistence on shielding him rang hollow. She has never prioritized protecting Tom. She's prioritized protecting herself from the optics of being the producer who oversaw bullying, negligence, or worse. Ultimately, the theory that Lisa was utterly oblivious is laughable. More likely, she and production played cat and mouse with Tom and Rachel, hoping to catch them in the act on camera. Why warn Ariana off-screen when exposing it on-screen could cement Scandoval as the most explosive storyline Bravo has ever aired? Lisa Vanderpump is many things: restaurateur, reality star, dog savior. But above all, she is a master producer. She knew. She always knows. She simply waited, as she always does, for the most dramatic moment to let the cameras do the talking. The real scandal isn't that Tom Sandoval cheats, it's how he convinces everyone else he had to. Tom Sandoval has perfected one particular skill over the years: rewriting history to cast himself as the hapless man trapped in relationships he never had the courage to leave. With Kristen, he claimed entrapment. With Ariana, he peddled the same excuse, complete with tales of manipulation and even alleged threats. Anything to avoid admitting that his exit strategy was simply cheating. The narrative is always the same. I had no choice but to cheat. Never mind the elaborate cover-ups, sneaking off to Schwartz's, deleting evidence, booking Rachel's getaways with other people's credit cards. He still insisted it was Ariana's fault for not catching him sooner. His apologies, when he bothers to attempt them, reliably begin with, "I'm sorry, but..." followed by a litany of excuses. According to him, Ariana could have tracked his location. A clever twist, considering he never actually shared it with her. This pattern repeats with every partner. He grows restless, lines up the next girlfriend, then languishes in misery until the current one finally dumps him, thus preserving his favorite role, the victim. Kristen didn't give him enough sex. Ariana didn't give him enough sex. Conveniently, every woman is to blame for his inability to keep his pants zipped. Meanwhile, each new girlfriend is expected not only to provide emotional validation, but also to split the rent. Victoria, the latest in line, may want to keep her checkbook handy. History suggests the romance will expire long before the lease does. His cruelty is hardly subtle. He lied to Rachel, claiming he wasn't sleeping with Ariana, then mocked Ariana in front of Rachel when the truth came out. Who could forget the grotesque t-shirt moment, straight from the Jax Taylor school of degradation? Just as Jax once wore down Brittany until she broke up with him, Sandoval too prefers to mistreat women until they do the dirty work of ending things for him. The red flags have been flying since the show's earliest days. Kristen once alluded to their overlap before Ariana, but the narrative was dismissed amid her own erratic behavior. Ariana herself, fresh from an abusive relationship, was love-bombed into the familiar us against the world script that Sandoval uses to trap every new conquest. Rachel had no such excuse. She had both the show's history and her friendship with Ariana to warn her. Yet she still fell into the same pattern, perhaps blinded by her own vulnerability post-pageants. The cycle is always the same: dissatisfaction, deflection, blame, and betrayal, dressed up as love, then discarded with disdain the moment a woman refuses to play along. Victoria has the benefit of hindsight and a wealth of televised evidence. Whether she uses it to her advantage remains to be seen. What is certain is that Sandoval's greatest consistency lies not in music, business, or relationships, but in cowardice. He cheats, he lies, he rewrites the narrative, and he demands sympathy. Like Jax before him, he's less a leading man than a cautionary tale. Proof that some men never mature past the role of self-pitying adolescent, forever waiting for women to do the breaking up on their behalf. What if I told you Tom Sandoval's most vulnerable moment was actually his most manipulative? Few reality television villains ignite as much polarized speculation as Tom Sandoval. In Season 11, Episode 3, his disclosure of suicidal thoughts to Lisa Vanderpump raised a question that has reverberated among viewers. Was it a genuine expression of crisis, or a calculated plea for sympathy? This isn't idle gossip. Vanderpump herself has endured the trauma of losing a brother to suicide, making the timing and delivery of Sandoval's revelation especially conspicuous. In that moment, his confession felt less like a plea for help and more like a tactical move, one designed to soften Vanderpump, sway the group, and perhaps salvage his tarnished reputation. The optics were unmistakable, an embattled man reaching for the one narrative powerful enough to shift public opinion. None of this denies the seriousness of suicidal ideation. It should always be treated with gravity. Yet Sandoval's history of weaponizing others' vulnerabilities, notably Ariana's private struggles, makes skepticism inevitable. When someone has previously betrayed a partner's confidences to justify their own misconduct, it becomes difficult to extend unqualified empathy when they present their own pain. Still, two truths can coexist. Sandoval's public downfall was spectacular. He went from a celebrated franchise favorite to a pariah almost overnight. The affair, the media frenzy, and the relentless vilification would test anyone's mental stability. It is entirely plausible that he felt isolated and desperate, even as he denied remorse for his actions. If anything, believing himself unfairly punished could have deepened his despair. But plausibility does not erase performance. Sandoval's on-screen demeanor, the familiar acting tics viewers have come to recognize, invited suspicion. The confession appeared rehearsed, even transactional, with strategic benefits extending beyond Vanderpump. Sympathy from viewers, a softer blow from Ariana, and perhaps leniency from his castmates. In a reality show environment where storylines are currency, the revelation felt less like an accident of raw emotion and more like a deliberate plot point. The hypocrisy of the discourse is equally glaring. Ariana, too, has been accused, sometimes viciously, of using her depression to keep Sandoval in the relationship. Yet those same viewers are often quick to decry Sandoval for similar behavior. The show's misogynistic undertones, its manipulative production tactics, and Vanderpump's own interests in preserving ratings muddy the waters even further. It's not impossible that production encouraged Sandoval to lean into his darkest moments for narrative impact. In the end, no one but Sandoval knows the truth of his mental state. It's possible he was genuinely suicidal. It's possible he weaponized the idea to repair his image. Both scenarios could even be true simultaneously. But if his disclosure was indeed a ploy, it was a grotesque one, exploiting a deeply serious issue for personal gain. And if it was genuine, then it remains a tragic byproduct of a spectacularly self-inflicted fall from grace. What is certain is that the burden of managing Sandoval's crisis should never have been placed on Ariana. Nor should Shiana's performative tears have been treated as evidence of loyalty. Friends could have checked in privately. Production could have ensured his safety. Instead, the scene became yet another public battleground for loyalty, pity, and judgment. Exactly the kind of environment where sincerity and manipulation become indistinguishable. Ultimately, Sandoval's confession did little to redeem him. Whether authentic or contrived, it failed to shift the narrative. He remains the architect of his own downfall, and reality television remains the arena where even the darkest human experiences risk becoming just another storyline. They all claimed to hate Kristen, so why was Ariana the one punished for not wanting her around? Season 4 raises an obvious question. Why was there such relentless pressure on Ariana to tolerate Kristen's presence? The group spent more time mocking Kristen than defending her, yet they appeared shocked when Ariana wanted no part of her. It's almost as if Ariana was expected to play the saint, grinning politely while her boyfriend's ex, who had openly tried to sabotage their relationship, hovered around like an uninvited house guest. Of course, the hypocrisy wasn't unique to Ariana's situation. Stassi once occupied that same enemy of Kristen role, only to later be folded back into Kristen's circle. The difference, of course, is that Stassi was part of the original nucleus of Friends, while Ariana was always positioned as an outsider. Producers, desperate to maintain conflict on screen, clearly pushed for these forced reconciliations. The same logic applied when James was dragged back into group scenes despite widespread disdain, or when Ariana was nudged to film with Sandoval after their breakup. Personal boundaries have always been secondary to keeping the cameras rolling. What makes the situation even more absurd is the contrast between what played out on television and what unfolded off-camera. Scroll through the cast's social media from that era, and Kristen appears in nearly every hangout. The supposed pariah of Sur was, in reality, deeply woven into the group. Frenemy dynamics certainly existed, particularly with Stassi, but Kristen was genuinely part of their social fabric. Ariana, by contrast, never enjoyed that same acceptance, save for her bond with Shiana. To the rest, Ariana's refusal to move on simply disrupted trips, storylines, and the smooth flow of production. There's also the lingering rumor that Kristen's status in the group wasn't just about loyalty or history. The theory goes that she served another, less wholesome role within the circle, which might explain why she remained untouchable despite repeated betrayals. Whether true or not, it offers one explanation for why she was consistently protected, forgiven, and pushed into storylines where she had no business being, often at the expense of those who had every reason to want her gone. At its core, the Kristen-Ariana standoff underscores the show's fundamental rule. Personal grievances are negotiable, but production needs are not. Ariana may have had every reason to draw the line, but in the world of Vanderpump Rules, refusing to play nice isn't just inconvenient, it's bad television. This is what happens when you build a whole storyline around a guy who couldn't care less. Rob was cast as Shiana's gleaming Adonis, a man supposedly more skilled, more successful, and more impressive than reality could ever support. Shiana built him up like a mythological hero, yet on camera, he made it abundantly clear he was only half invested. He openly admitted his disinterest, then promptly walked away when the cameras shut off. And still, remarkably, she never turned on him. Instead, she deflected blame onto Katie for creating drama, as though the footage of Rob's detachment didn't speak for itself. The irony of this dynamic is almost Shakespearean. Rob, the least likely Vanderpump Rules alumnus to feel compelled to tell his side, has been treated with near reverence. Even years later, Sheena invited him onto her podcast for what amounted to a polite, uncontroversial interview. A conversation so bland that one has to Google it to remember it even happened. What stands out more than the content of that podcast is the cultural memory of Shiana herself. Her voice, a relentless pitch, has often been likened to nails on a chalkboard. Her laugh, a machine gun witch cackle. Once heard, it cannot be unheard. And yet she uses that platform to reframe her narrative again and again, even while Rob's indifference remains the unspoken headline. Perhaps the most telling moment was Kristen's anecdote. Rob supposedly caught making out with someone else. Shiana's defense? He doesn't even like kissing. The collective reaction from viewers was swift and unified. He doesn't like kissing you. This is the Shiana paradox in its purest form. Unwavering devotion to an idealized partner, even as the evidence of his disinterest piles up. In short, Rob's mythos was Shiana's creation. And while the illusion may have crumbled for viewers long ago, Shiana's refusal to acknowledge the obvious keeps this odd little chapter of Vanderpump Rules frozen in time, an enduring lesson in self-delusion wrapped in podcast chatter and machine gun laughter. Katie marrying Schwartz, twice, wasn't romantic, it was tragic. Even the most likable Vanderpump players have their moments of pure, second-hand embarrassment theater. These are the low points, the scenes where affection for the cast survives, but only barely. Take Lala and the infamous baby bottle incident. Nothing says glamorous like an adult woman sipping Formula Chic at the table. Cringe doesn't even begin to cover it. Then there's Ariana, whose foray into sketch comedy might be the most unintentionally funny thing she's ever done. Mugging, winking, and breaking the first rule of comedy. Taking the scene seriously, she delivered a performance that managed to be both brutal and boring. Ironically, her offhand quips land better than anything in her carefully staged routines. Charlie, on the other hand, gifted us with the "I don't eat pasta" debacle. At first glance, it was a vapid line destined for memedom. Later, it became clear that it masked something darker, a history of trauma and complicated issues with food. In retrospect, the comment reads more as a deflection than a statement, which explains its awkwardness. Admirably, she never indulged the cameras with graphic detail. Her choice to later expand her diet showed resilience, not weakness. Still, no one asked if she'd ever twirled a fork through linguine. The unsolicited declaration was bizarre. Katie earns 2 spots on this Hall of Shame. First, the decision to marry Schwartz, twice, after he humiliated her with one of his many tirades. It was the ultimate missed exit on the highway of bad relationships. Then there was her turn as Bridezilla in Season 5, a performance that still lingers like a hangover from a bottle of Pumptini mix. Growth has come since, but the detour was rough. Kristen's worst? Jax. Enough said. Even beloved Ariana had a fatal flaw, her selective outrage. She was ferocious when Sandoval betrayed her, as she should have been, but for years she defended him blindly, excusing or ignoring the warning signs that would have leveled anyone else. Her rage during Scandoval was justified a million times over, yet the blind loyalty beforehand left her without the moral high ground she could have easily claimed. Meanwhile, Schwartz and Raquel's Mexico kiss was painted as a scandal, but was, in reality, exactly the opposite. Katie asked for one thing: don't date or make out with coworkers while our divorce papers are still warm. A perfectly reasonable boundary after 12 years with a man who consistently prioritized everyone else. Schwartz, of course, trampled it. The true absurdity wasn't Katie's reaction, but the chorus acting like she owed him friendship and grace while he publicly disrespected her. Divorce is ugly, but boundaries are not optional. Elsewhere in the land of poor judgment, Dana with Brett. Max may be a garden variety playboy, but Brett? Watching a human boulder attempt small talk. Truly dire. The irony is that these aren't villains' moments. They belong to the cast members we root for, the ones we're supposed to like. Yet Vanderpump Rules has always thrived on the tension between affection and repulsion, reminding viewers that loving someone doesn't mean liking everything they do. And frankly, it's the least favorite moments that often reveal the most. Everyone's calling it a love affair, but let's be honest. Rachel and Sandoval weren't in love. They were in cosplay as deep people. Vanderpump Rules was never meant to be prestige television, but by Season 10, it had somehow stumbled into Shakespearean absurdity disguised as reality TV. Enter Rachel and Tom Sandoval, 2 people so desperate to appear interesting that they've practically reduced themselves to caricatures. Rachel drifts through scenes like a knockoff festival influencer, all glamping, Coachella, and galaxy lights, the kind of faux whimsical personality built entirely on pointing at things slowly, as though discovering the universe in real time. Meanwhile, Sandoval, at the eternally tragic age of 40, clings to a Peter Pan fantasy of shrooms at sunrise and off-key cover songs purchased with session musicians on retainer. His aesthetic is less rock star and more Buckcherry tribute band at a county fair. Yet he radiates self-importance, as though he's fronting a revolution. Together, they embody a particularly grating brand of delusion. Two vapid people validating each other's shallow rebellion against the grown-up world. Watching their scandal unfold with foreknowledge only makes their self-justification more ridiculous. That either of them imagined a triumphant return to the show is laughable. Rachel, at least, managed one sliver of dignity by not returning for season 11. Whether it was self-preservation, a failed cash grab via podcasting, or sheer exhaustion, it remains her only respectable decision. Sandoval, of course, continues to perform his midlife crisis on camera, as if the world needed another season of him gasping for relevance. For those not content to merely watch the collapse, but eager to study it like a cultural artifact, there's no shortage of supplemental material. Danny Pellegrino's podcast provided genuine, in-the-moment reactions from someone close to the cast. Ben and Ronnie of Watch What Crappens managed their trademark joyful mien, skewering the absurdity without draining the fun. An American Scandival offered a concise, 3-part deep dive into the scandal's anatomy, short, sharp, and almost too good to end. And Ryan Bailey's So Bad It's Good chronicled the weeks between the scandal's eruption and the reunion with insider context and wry commentary. Even outside the Bravo bubble, the ripple effects are visible. Ariana Madix, once collateral damage, is now thriving on Love Island, a satisfying reminder that sometimes reality television does, in fact, reward survival. What began as tabloid fodder has cemented itself as pop culture mythology. The brilliance and the tragedy of Vanderpump Rules is that its villains will always return for another act, no matter how many times the audience begs them not to. Sandoval didn't just cheat, he orchestrated a betrayal years in the making, and the clues were always there. Katie Maloney's wedding remains one of the rare gems of reality television matrimony. Visually stunning, refreshingly tasteful, and undeniably her own. Unlike the parade of formulaic, televised fairy tales, the genre usually churns out, Katie's ceremony had an aesthetic sophistication that set it apart. The gown was uniquely her, perhaps not the predictable winner from her try-ons, but an inspired choice that delivered one of the most memorable bridal looks in reality TV history. Yet Katie's beauty wasn't the only thing worth re-examining. With the benefit of hindsight, it's impossible to ignore how often she was right. She had an almost instinctive ability to sniff out nonsense and call it for what it was, long before the rest of the cast, or the audience, caught up. Her loyalty, too, was unmatched. She went to war for her friends, shouldering public battles that others only whispered about in private. And how was that loyalty repaid? By her own husband gleefully throwing her to the wolves of misogynistic fan culture. Love may be blind, but this was willful blindness of the cruelest kind. Rewatching the series with Scandival looming in the distance is a surreal experience. Watching Tom Sandoval and Ariana cheer Raquel on at the Season 8 reunion feels like observing a Greek tragedy in progress, one where the heroine is still blissfully unaware that betrayal is already in motion. Ariana may have been blindsided, but Sandoval knew exactly what storm he was conjuring. Still, the show's brilliance lies in its ability to pair devastating foreshadowing with absurd comedy. Jax Taylor nearly drowning at Big Bear, too stubborn to admit it, is slapstick gold. The lifeguard's deadpan disbelief, "Are you kidding me?" sealed the moment as peak television. James Kennedy, usually a fountain of irritation, occasionally struck lightning in the form of biting one-liners. Even Stassi, no stranger to withering commentary, was caught laughing when James christened Schwartz a lover of sloppy joes. And then there's Jax, the show's paradox, an odious man by any moral standard, yet disturbingly perceptive. He may be a fool, but when his commentary doesn't directly involve him, it is often painfully accurate. His blunt honesty, Shiana as divorcee O, his deadpan refusal to watch her music video, or his unfiltered assessments of Britney's drinking, reveals a villain who, if slightly less toxic, might have been the perfect reality TV anti-hero. Some supporting arcs offered similar flashes of brilliance. The bachelor party and drag remains iconic, not least because of Schwartz perched miserably in costume, sparking debates about whether he was on a bed or a toilet. Sheena, so often derided as opportunistic, occasionally proved her critics wrong. Her early warnings to Ariana about Sandoval were genuine, even if Ariana dismissed them at the time. That Ariana later demanded solidarity over his betrayal, despite dismissing those earlier red flags, is one of the show's most frustrating ironies. By the time Sheena dismantled Sandoval during the Scandoval finale, refusing to let his excuses or his weaponizing of Ariana's mental health stand, the tables had turned. In that moment, Sheena embodied the voice of reason Ariana once ignored. Sandoval's cowardice was laid bare. If he truly wanted to end things, he could have simply ended them. Instead, he chose the most selfish route possible, dragging everyone down with him. And amid all this chaos, the comedy never stopped. James mocking Sandoval's guest list as a who's who of who the fuck are you, Jax botching breakups with Olympian levels of self-delusion, and the reveal of James' DJ booth doubling as a broom closet. These moments are proof of why Vanderpump Rules remains addictive. The series thrives on contradictions. Beauty paired with betrayal, loyalty rewarded with cruelty, villains who sometimes tell the sharpest truths. Katie's wedding, Ariana's blind spots, Jax's accidental wisdom, and Shauna's brief moments of clarity all illustrate the messy brilliance of this world. It's a show where the villains are perceptive, the heroes are flawed, and the comedy is never entirely unintentional.